Well, welcome, Katie, to the Caregiver Cup podcast. I know from a listener perspective, everybody welcomes you with open arms, and we cannot wait to go ahead and hear about yourself and your story. And I don't know what the project is called, but I'm going to say passion project. But I'm
Yeah.
going to let you discuss that as we move forward. So, welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll jump into your caregiving story. But let's learn a little bit about Katie first.
Sure, sure. I am an actor and filmmaker. That is a second act career for me. It wasn't
Right.
something I've done my whole life. I am also a mother of four children. And my husband and I, our children and our two dogs live in Portland, Oregon. And we've been here for about 16 years, but I've lived all over the country. So that's a
Okay.
little bit about me.
Yeah, I was wondering where you were at. I didn't know if you were in the being an actor. I did actress. I didn't know if you were in the LA area but you're out on the West Coast, which is probably the important piece as well. So
Yes, yes.
wonderful, wonderful. Boys or girls?
We have three sons and one daughter.
Okay. I
So
have
my
three.
daughter is third in the order. So,
Okay, okay. Yeah, I
yeah.
raised three boys myself, but never got that girl. But I have two grand girls, so I take advantage of that
Oh,
too. So,
that's so sweet. I love
yes,
that. Yeah, boys are
yes.
so fun and just a different category of their own, for
Yeah, they
sure.
are. Definitely, definitely. Well, tell us about the your caregiving story because I think that's important piece. Now, you are a caregiver with four kids, but
Sure.
all of a sudden I read that your mom was diagnosed. So tell us about that, or you
Sure.
became a
Yeah.
caregiver for your mom.
Right. Just to give a little bit of context, we lost my mom about 8 years ago. So this journey was it feels like a longer time ago now. And I think back and think, oh wow, I was in my late 30s, like raising four children. They were in elementary school. And my mom started exhibiting some odd behaviors. She started describing things that at first she lived alone. And at first I just thought something was off, like with where she was living or something like that. But as her scenarios became a little more wild and extravagant, I started thinking something was really wrong. So,
Okay.
this was probably when she was right around 60 years of
Okay.
age. So
Okay.
I think she probably had things going on in her 50s with what she was diagnosed with. So anyway, all of that to say, it was kind of we were propelled into this. My sister, brother, and my mom were all living in Georgia at this point, and I was
Okay.
already in Portland. And we were like, we need to take mom in. Something's up. Maybe your meds are off or something like that. But what we discovered after a while of different doctors, different appointments, is that my mom had a rare type of dementia called frontotemporal dementia.
Okay.
So I'm going to call it FTD in our podcast for
Okay.
those who haven't heard of it before. FTD is what Bruce Willis and Wendy Williams have recently shared with the public that they're diagnosed with also, just to give a
Hmm.
little connection.
Okay.
Um, but it was one of those, I know everyone's caregiving journeys are different, and some of us, have kind of a slow roll into it and a long journey. Mine felt more like a catapult, like, what do we do now with mom? Because her very first appointment, the doctor said she can't drive and she can't live alone. She has some sort of delusional disorder.
I was going to ask you that. Oh my gosh. Okay. So what does that
So,
mean, right?
exactly, exactly. And so my sister and I immediately were on the phone, like, what do we do? Like,
Yeah.
like you're sitting in an appointment and you're told that your person can't live alone or drive. It's okay. Like, this was, I don't remember how many years ago, but this was definitely in this month of the year because I remember
Okay.
my sister and I kind of both saying, well, she can come stay with us. Like we were both like juggling little kids.
Yeah.
Mom was still like wonderful to have around and like helpful. And so we were kind of like, yeah, that's great. Okay, she can live with us. This is weird. We don't know what's going on. My sister ended up taking her in, and we were like, let's get through the holidays and we'll kind of figure out what's what. And my sister proceeded to take her to different doctor's appointments. Eventually, we got the diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia. Just for awareness, it typically can take an average of 3.5 years to even get that diagnosis
Really?
because the exhibiting behaviors and things that happen with people with FTD are often misdiagnosed and misinterpreted.
Okay.
Um, because people are younger often with it. It's I've heard everything from menopause to, oh, your person's an alcoholic to, the depression because there's like, personality shifts often. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, it's so unfortunate because a lot often families are really confused and frustrated with their loved ones because of the behavioral changes that they're exhibiting.
Yeah.
And if they knew it was FTD, that shifts everything in how you
How did
relate to
they
someone.
how did they diagnose it? Did they do scans of her brain, or how did
Yes.
it officially get diagnosed? Because I don't know a lot about FTD.
Yeah, a lot of people don't, but we're
Yeah.
hoping to change that.
Yes.
They did eventually, my sister took her to a neurologist and they did a
Okay.
brain scan. And that was when we first heard the term FTD.
Okay.
And my honest confession is even hearing it then, I was kind of like, oh, okay, mom has some sort of dementia that's in her frontotemporal lobes. And that was all I could comprehend at that point. And,
Right.
back then I was like, oh, Alzheimer's, dementia, it's all kind of the same world. And I don't know. And so often with caregiving, I don't know. Some people always amaze me when they're able to dive into research and
Yeah.
knowledge. And you are one of those people to me,
Yeah.
Kathy, like the
Yeah.
way you were able to pivot your life and dive into caring for so many people in your
Yeah.
story, but also diving into becoming a helper even in the midst of it. Wow,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
inspires me so much. I feel like I was just dealing with my own denial and coping in my own ways.
Yeah. But I think with that type of diagnosis, it's like you can't see it. It reminds me of when my dad had pancreatic cancer. He denied it for months
Yeah.
because he said, "I don't feel sick. I don't feel sick." And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, bam, he
Yeah.
was sick. And
Hmm.
I think that you were probably going through the grieving process at that time and you didn't even know it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, I think you're just dealing with the crisis of how do we support this person we love and ourselves?
Hmm.
And that coping looks different for everyone. For our story, thankfully, my sister was able to care for my mom for 2 years. My
Okay.
mom lived with them, and my mom was declining fairly quickly with them. And they were reaching their max. They were feeling like they kind of had gotten to their level of ability to care for mom and were considering like what their next steps could be. And I was out Oregon coast, like
Yeah.
thinking, or the West Coast in Oregon, and thinking like, I need to be in person with mom. I need to be with
Right.
her and have her physical presence in my life. I can't
Right.
cope with the thought of her going to a home in Georgia and just, doing the math of how often would I actually even be able to see her in a year.
Hmm.
So my husband and I made the decision to have mom come out and live with us. And so I'm extremely thankful to have spent mom's, it was her final 2 years that she lived with us in Oregon. We were able to keep her in our home for about 6 months, but honestly, like even in the very beginning when she first moved in, I realized she was way more progressed than I knew.
Can you tell us what it kind of looked like for
Sure,
us? What did you
sure.
see, or what actions did
Yes.
you see, or what
Mm,
behaviors?
yes. Yes, so with my mom's, there's different variants of FTD, and there is a behavioral variant that some people have that really changes their personality. They may go from being really angry to like
Mm,
jovial. They might go the other way of a lot of times people with FTD get arrested or they
that.
drink too much. Like there's things that happen. It takes away your compulsion control and it shifts your personality. For my mom's particular strain of FTD, she had primary progressive aphasia, which is the loss of being able to speak.
Okay.
So my mom, when she came to live with us, she was already speaking very little.
Mm,
She would often whisper if she did say things. She would repeat phrases. She often said, okay, okay, okay. Or she would say, let's go. She always wanted to go somewhere.
mm,
Um, so that's a really common trait with the primary progressive aphasia strain of FTD. There's also Lewy body dementia, which is more of a physical manifestation. So the thing that I've learned with FTD is often the beginning strain of whatever type you have will morph into each other.
mm,
So my mom, by the time she came to live with us, was already experiencing incontinence, but I didn't know that. She was wandering at night. She was very food and beverage fixated. So that meant that we would find her in the pantry, like eating everything and drinking every liquid. Like if you had a drink out, she might walk by and just consume it. um,
oh my gosh. And
so
I can't even imagine you trying to take care of your children
yeah,
and your spouse and you, and
yeah,
having to watch her probably every minute.
yeah, it felt like that.
Oh,
And trying to help the kids understand,
yeah.
because those behaviors can be hard, if someone is eating everything or drinking. I had to get a locking we had to get a locking fridge, and that feels like almost mean because you're, like,
Mhm.
keeping someone from food, but it's
Yeah.
just so complicated. Thankfully, we sold my mom's house, and we were able to use some of those funds, to hire a caregiver to come in just so that we could have a break and
Mm,
work and take care of the kids. But even then, I just felt like the pressure kept growing and building because my mom was wandering and we really couldn't leave her alone. She was getting up at night,
mm,
just it was just she really need around the clock care and we felt
mhm,
so maxed out. So we we ended up getting involved with a program that helped us with connecting us with a social worker, a doctor, and a nurse that would oversee mom's care. And this program allowed her to spend down any money that she had and transitioned her onto Medicaid.
yeah.
Um, but even that, the financials of it all is just so maddening too. When someone
Yeah.
has a tiny bit of nest egg and then you're
Yeah.
like, why have
Yeah.
money?
Yeah, I
Um,
just I just interviewed and she'll be on the one of our podcasts next week, but she was just talking about she was in the field from a social worker perspective and in the elderly care, and she was talking about just the average long-term facility is about $11,000 a month. And I can't even imagine that care for your mom has to be astronomically more.
yeah,
Ugh,
yeah. And I was like terrified of it was all so unknown to me. And I was
yeah.
terrified of like some sort of like nurse ratchet
Yeah.
government, like, I was like, this is all we're going to be able to do for my mom. And that's terrifying. And you
Yeah.
hear all the horror stories of
Yeah. Well,
care homes.
tell me about your mom prior to her getting sick. What was she
Yeah.
like? Because I think that's the most important piece too,
Mhm.
because you feel torn as a caregiver in your own, you're taking care of them in their hardest, challenging times. But prior to that, I'm
Yeah.
sure she was a lovely lady. What, tell me about her.
Yeah, I love that question, and I think
Yeah.
it's so good for all of us to circle
Yeah.
back to that. Um, my mom first of all, my mom was just always kind of a safe place for me. Like, I think
Hmm.
about, like, I could tell her anything. I would turn into the biggest goofball with her just to, like, shock her and make her laugh all the time.
Yeah.
My mom was a pretty happy-go-lucky person. She like, when I think of her in my childhood, she would often, like, make up little jingle songs as she was doing things.
Oh.
It might be, like, waiting for the toast in the toaster or waiting for the light to turn green. She would, like, make up silly songs. She was always, like, really into crafting and, like,
Mm.
cooking from scratch, and she's, like, that classic Midwestern girl next door type of
Mm.
person.
Mm.
Um
Is it right that I saw that you grew up in Ohio? Was that
Yeah,
where
my
you grew up?
mom and my dad are from Ohio, and I
Yeah.
was there all of my elementary years.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
So
that,
the hearty, grew up
yeah.
playing in the cornfields, eating
Yeah.
meatloaf and mixed veggies is so my
Oh,
experience
yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
You should have saw Katie's smile and her face just went big when she started sharing about her mom, because I think that's where we are as
Yeah.
caregivers. We're in
Yeah.
that midst of watching your loved one go through this disease or
Mm,
this pain or whatever, and we do it out of love and we do it out of responsibility, and
right.
you tend to, in these challenging times, forget who they are really.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
And
Yes.
trying to remember to try and be present with them in that moment.
Mhm.
And you're seeing, like, the pain or the decline that your person is in, and there's so many true emotional responses that you're allowed to have. But I think for me, one of the most comforting things in my journey with mom, even as she was very declined, is just being next to her.
Oh God. Yeah.
It's like being able to touch your loved one. It's just
Yeah.
so
Did she
special.
still recognize you throughout all of it, or was it harder as the disease progressed?
Yeah, this is such a good question because so many people affiliate dementia with Alzheimer's, which
Alzheimer's.
is memory,
Hmm.
and FTD doesn't really affect your memory. It just affects your cognitive abilities and your
Okay.
personality and your speech and all of that.
Okay.
So, my mom wasn't able to communicate, so it was really tricky to know for sure, like, what she was feeling or
Yeah.
thinking. However, I did see her eyes. She would recognize me.
Okay. Good.
She would kind of big eyes, and she might be, "Okay," just
Okay.
give me
A little K, huh?
a little acknowledgement. So yeah, I think she did. That I think that's a hard piece with this type of
Yeah.
thing, though,
Yeah, it
because you
is.
don't know.
Mm-mm.
And I think it serves us to believe and really believe that they do know.
Yeah. 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 And I
That they
think
know you, but maybe they don't know all the terrible, difficult stuff that they're dealing with.
right. And
That's the
probably,
optimist in me.
yeah. And probably the human touch, like you had said, that's probably
Mm,
something that they could connect
yeah,
with,
yeah.
and being able to do that. Through it all, you had to probably be this advocate. You had to
Mm,
take care of yourself. So let's talk about both of those, as
yeah.
far as what advocacy pieces did you learn along the way from doing the whole process?
Ooh,
You
yeah.
know,
Ugh. Kathy, I look at my journey sometimes and I see more of my own humanity, and I what I mean by that is sometimes it's easy for me to see the ways I didn't do the
Yeah,
things
I
that I
know.
wanted to do. And
Mhm.
I know it's easy for all of us to do that. And I
Yeah.
will say this, like anytime we experience, I'm going to air quote guilt, and I'm going to rephrase it into regret.
Yeah.
When we feel that regret, I do think that we can comfort ourselves in knowing that that means there was so much love.
Yes.
Regret means love.
Mhm.
Advocacy, I think about my own life. So my really true caregiving journey was about 2 years with mom.
Yeah.
So I see that because it was short, I look back and I think there was a contraction happening in life of where I needed to pull back. And I think some of that advocacy is just doing that, just like
Yeah.
saying, it is okay for my life to feel somehow smaller and like social and all the ways that you kind of have to
Yeah.
contract
Yeah.
when you're caregiving. Maybe I'm working less. Maybe I'm doing less with friends and whatnot. However, it's what I need in this moment.
You do. You do.
um,
It's
and
am
just,
yeah.
yeah,
It's just amazing how we, mostly women, because mostly the women are the ones that are taking care of mom and dad. Not saying that the men don't, but you're just throwing into this with
yes,
trying to figure out and navigate the waters, and you
yes,
have to be this person that's going to be there for your mom, but then you also have to keep yourself afloat at the same time. I'm so glad
mm,
that I heard that you got a doctor, a social
hmm,
worker, you got the resources that you needed to
hmm,
go ahead and try to figure that out. But then also in that chaotic time, you just did enough to probably just thrive and
yeah,
survive. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
It's just, I think for me, I felt like the program we got affiliated with felt like a godsend. It felt like I didn't feel like I was doing a good job researching and knowing and whatever, and then that fell into my lap through like a circumstance where I had to take mom to the doctor, and
God.
I was just like floored,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's tricky. I was thinking a lot about this journey, how familiar it felt to me in my own um, childbirthing years of
Yeah.
that similar feeling of you have a baby, you get pregnant, and you have this knowledge that your body's not fully your own, that you
Hmm.
are caring for this baby. And I remember thinking about all the changes and thinking like, I am letting go of what I want to watch your body expand and all of
Yeah.
that, and like to give this life.
Yeah.
And then when the baby's born, there's this stillness and quiet and need to contract again, pull back from life and keep things easy and like give nurture and growth where it needs to happen. Give healing to your own body as your child is growing.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about my season with my mom was similar to that of
Hmm.
like, even though I was watching her decline, there was still this like, this chapter is not fully mine.
Yeah.
And I can give and know that it's to support another life in a
Yeah.
similar way.
That's a beautiful mindset, because I think that instead of fighting it,
Mm.
you just embraced it and you just let it happen.
Ooh.
And I think that, yeah, you have to,
Mhm.
you could drive yourself crazy if you
Oh,
try to go ahead and do too much. I mean, I remember the same thing with myself is I can't keep I couldn't just keep doing my corporate job and doing all of the things I had to do and then shove in, and no disrespect, shove in care for my dad and shove in care for my husband and expect me to just be this engine that could all the time.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't. You have to go ahead and take a step back and saying, this is a different season of life now for me.
Yeah, and that's so hard on our identity too,
Oh,
because, you go to work and you feel like you're contributing and like
Yeah.
your value and all of that feels like heightened. And then you caregive and you feel like nobody even knows.
I
Like nobody
know.
knows. Like
Yeah.
and I'm just trying to breathe here.
Yeah.
I want to be clear
Yeah.
that I didn't arrive to that beautiful, peaceful analogy without kicking and screaming that I
Oh, me
shared.
too. Me too.
I I there is a visceral memory that I have of me standing in my living room. I could have physically torn my walls down. Like that's how
I think that's normal
tight
human behavior.
100%, a hundred
Oh,
percent, and I
yeah.
remember just screaming like, "I don't want this." It was more internal, but I just was like, "I could literally tear this house down with my fingers. I'm
Yeah.
so mad at the circumstances right
Yeah.
now."
Yeah. I can't
And
even
then
imagine how your kids felt. Probably everybody felt that way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you, like, reading some of your story, thinking about how you just got one wave after the other
Yeah.
with so many things, and I think for me, like, standing there clenched, screaming metaphorically, "I don't want this." And I remember almost like seeing myself and thinking, "How is that changing anything?"
Yeah. But you needed to get there, Katie.
I did.
You
It's
needed
like
that.
having that moment and then realizing like how it didn't really change anything or control anything. And then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
the only path through this is through acceptance.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and that's such a hard journey to be on as we're
It's
both
so
drinking our
hard.
water, our coffee. I'm gonna
I
drink my
know.
coffee, so
Well, cheers to
it's
that.
probably cold.
Cheers to that for
Well,
sure.
let's transition now with, I think that, I'm looking at all of your pieces that you transitioned in midlife to being an actress, which is just
Mhm.
phenomenal. But you're working on this new film, and
Yes.
I would love to hear how this story and how
Mm.
this journey now got you to the film. And is it called Wake Up Maggie?
Yes, it's called Wake Up
Yes.
Maggie.
Yes, let's hear about
Oh,
this.
thank you for asking. I
Yeah.
am so excited about making this film. And I feel like, again, if we take this analogy of contraction with caring for my mom, when when I let go and had to say goodbye to her, I feel like, I think her gift to me was thinking about how I wanted to live my life big and I wanted to love
Mm,
big. Um, so also there's two parts. One is I feel like, oh, I have space to expand now because this caregiving journey that I experienced with mom is over. Um, who knows when we'll get to caregive again.
mhm,
But I have this moment of this new chapter where I can expand. And so I started acting and started filmmaking. And I think in those years, I also started deeply processing my own fear around getting FTD,
mm.
which I was in major denial that there would be any kind of genetic strain for me. But then my uncle was diagnosed, my mom's brother.
Oh, no.
So there is
Oh,
this reality that I'm living with, and I would like to do the testing in the future and contribute to research to find out. But, having when you watch someone go through something difficult like FTD or anything that you witness a loved one go through, I think it's probably common to fear
mhm,
that happening to you because it is traumatizing.
yeah,
And so I was already fearing it. And then when my uncle got it, I was like, okay, this
yeah,
is likely that we have a genetic strain. And again, it's that control, like I don't want that, to acceptance because I had to make peace with that. Like, what would you do if you knew you had it today? Like, what would you do? And
yeah.
I thought, oh, I would make this movie and make this
Okay.
movie and I would live my life and love
Okay.
as big as possible. So here we are. I'm making Wake Up Maggie. This is a movie that is, I would call a love letter to caregivers. I hope that all of you listening will feel seen and less alone in your journey. Wake Up Maggie, I'm also calling a coming of middle age film,
Mm.
which we have a
Mhm.
lot of coming of age movies and I love them, but we need
Yes.
more coming of middle age.
Yeah.
So it's about the journey. Maggie is our main character and she's named after my mom, but her journey of moving through midlife, thinking she can control everything, and she kind of does. She has it all like tightly wound until her estranged sister finds herself in some trouble. She gets arrested, and Maggie has to decide whether to enter in. When Maggie does, she realizes there's more going on.
Mm.
And so it's about Maggie's life being catapulted into caregiving and just the unraveling that happens with all of that.
Mm.
But ultimately, my belief and my hope to show in this film is that unraveling can lead to our own good if
Yeah.
we can move into acceptance.
Oh,
So,
it's such a perfect piece. I mean, I think it is. It is Maggie. Are you going to focus on the FTD piece there? Is
yes,
that
yes.
okay?
So,
That's good
there,
too. The
yes,
awareness piece will be so good for
it's
everybody.
so good. I feel like the large umbrella of this film is that it's going to be for all of us who understand how midlife makes us pause and evaluate our lives.
Yeah.
Then the next umbrella is caregivers. Anyone who's ever been a caregiver is going to relate
Awesome.
deeply to this film
Hmm.
and just the true, real life, very grounded struggle that we find
Oh
ourselves
my
in,
gosh. Oh my
but
gosh.
also the joy and like the laughter that happens in the middle of it
My
too.
gosh.
It's not just a depressing film, I promise.
Yes. No, it's
um
like I'm laughing because there's so many fun little humorous memories that I have of my dad and my mom and even my
yes.
spouse when, anytime my spouse would come out of anesthesia, he's just crazy and he's not that way ever. And some of it I couldn't even say out loud because it's
Yes.
just so intimate and
Yes.
crazy. So,
Yes.
but yeah.
Exactly. I mean, my belief is you have to laugh. If you don't
Yes.
laugh, you might as well just crumble up in the corner and die because it's like let it out. Like we
Yeah.
can find joy and beauty and hope despite it all.
Oh my
And
gosh. Such a great message. Such a great
this
message.
Wake Up Maggie is going to be so beautiful. We're planning to film early in 2025, so it's
Mhm.
right around the corner.
So fun.
And we're just currently working on growing our fundraising, and then
Okay.
we'll be hiring and our cast and crew and all of that just leading up to production. So
Okay.
it is such a joy. I cannot believe that I get to work on something that brings me so much happiness and creativity, and
Mm.
that I truly believe
Yeah.
is my calling. It's like
Yeah.
healing to me, and I think it's going to be healing and hopeful to so many.
Awesome.
What a
Awesome.
privilege. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can go to wakeupmaggie.com. Sorry, my dogs are barking. Can you hear that?
I didn't hear yours, but mine were just barking too.
Oh, you can't hear mine. Good. Mine are barking because somebody just rang the doorbell and they can just
Oh,
wait.
always, right?
Always.
Always.
Yes.
Yes. Wakeupmaggiemovie.com is where you'll find us.
Wakeupmaggie.com. I'll put that in the
Yes.
show notes as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also saw that FTD, is there a website for the disease?
Yes. 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 Highly recommend. You can go to theftd.com. I think
Okay.
it's the Association of Frontotemporal Dementia.
Okay.
They're very helpful, resourceful site.
Good. Good.
Yeah, there's also, I would highly recommend Hilarity for Charity for caregivers if they
Okay.
don't know that organization. That's
Wonderful.
beautiful.
Good.
Um, and
I
if you
mean,
want a specific source for FTD, there's also Remember Me podcast, which I just have to
okay.
give a
Okay.
shout out to those ladies
Wonderful.
because they highlight FTD specifically in a beautiful way.
Perfect. Perfect. Because I think that is just an important piece. Like you had said, we
Yeah.
never know when a loved
Yeah.
one may be in that dementia phase where we
Totally.
need to look at all of the all of the avenues to try to narrow it down and trying to figure out
Right.
what they're at as well. So, oh my
Exactly.
gosh. I just have two more questions. I always do a couple of like rapid fire questions at the
Ooh.
end to help the caregivers understand. So, your perspective. If you had advice for a new caregiver, and they were coming into the caregiver space, and it may be FTD, it may be something else.
Mm.
What advice would you have for them?
I think one is find some source of community because it's very easy to assume you're all alone. And
Mhm.
knowing you're not just soothes so much. So, whether it's one person that understands, or a support group, or an online group of some kind,
Yes, yes,
find that.
I
Um,
agree, I agree.
And then
Yeah,
the second thing I would say is look for that we can give ourselves love and care in such small little ways, like a nice, beautiful lotion to put on your hands,
mm,
or a really nice glass of water that you intentionally drink with like focused thought. It's like taking those moments of, even if it's 10 seconds, a minute, where you just sit there and say, "This is for me. I'm going to enjoy this moment."
I love that, relating that object or that smell or something to being able to go ahead and do that. I love that idea. I've never thought
Mm,
of that, but yeah, because it doesn't have to be, because when you use the word self-care to a caregiver, they kind of like,
right.
it's another
Ha,
task
ha,
on my
ha,
list.
ha.
How am I going to get that done? And it doesn't have to be that
No,
much. No, it can be
no.
something simple.
So simple. Like honestly, like some of the times I've literally used lotion, and anytime I'm feeling like my anxiety raise, just kind of
Hmm.
give myself a little hand massage with it.
Yeah,
Even in the midst of it all, it's just
yeah, yeah,
subtle and
yeah,
helpful.
yeah. If you had to, I want to ask you this, and it's kind of a two-part. If you had to think about one of your most challenging times in caregiving, and then look at it as a piece that you had figured out and you're most proud of, I want to ask you, what are you most proud of when you had that challenge? Do you have an event in your life that, during the caregiving part, that you were proud that I mean, you talked about that pivotal moment where you
Mm,
were ready to tear the house apart and then
mhm,
came to the acceptance. But
mm,
do you have any other pieces that, you had a challenge and then I'm proud that I did this or did that or felt that way or accepted it.
mm, mm. Yeah, I think what comes to mind with that question is any of those moments where I found myself w- in ease and acceptance in the midst of it, um, allowing the beauty of the world to still be seen by me. You know what I mean? Like it's so easy to only see the hard. Um,
I know what you mean because, yeah, be really focusing on. I always tell people or tell caregivers, we see the negative, but there's so many things
mm,
that happen throughout the day that we should be proud of or that we
yes.
should be focusing in on. Is that kind of what you're thinking about there?
Yeah, there's that. There's like allowing yourself to see the beauty, to find the laughter, to like smile
Yeah.
in the moments. I think I'm proud of sharing some of my story. Like I would
Mhm.
do so little, but I would like post a little Instagram post and
Yeah.
hashtag something about dementia. And that's how I found my community. Um, and then I think the other thing that stands out is just being, maybe this sounds, I don't know. I think being able to let go. Um, I think there's a really, really poignant moment with my mom where I got in bed with her and I said, "It's okay to go."
Mm. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think if we can move to those places of letting go of trying to control and really just stay present,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to not stay present
It is.
when you're in crisis, but
Yeah.
to stay present. So any of those moments where I was able to just be with her,
Yeah.
and be present in that moment. That's what stands out to me.
Right. Because sometimes for at least for me, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to do another piece with her. Or I have to go
Yeah.
visit her. And it is
Yeah.
an extra step, but then you look back at it and you're so glad you did. You're
Yeah.
so glad you did. And being present with them, even when my mom was in her last few days
Mm,
of she was I don't know, she was in this agitated state and she didn't
mm,
even want to talk to me. She was almost like
yeah.
she was mad at me, but I think in a way her gift was telling me to just let me alone, let me go.
Right.
You need to detach, Kathy. And I
I've
just
heard
held her
that.
hand and she squeezed it and I knew then she was okay. And just all those little pieces, you
Right.
know.
It's like sometimes we do things for ourselves more than for the person that we're caring for.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I think that you articulated that really beautifully where it's so often our people know when it's time and they
Yeah.
kind of do want us to give them space. It's
Yeah.
wild.
It is.
But yeah, that presence is huge. Like staying present in each moment and not
Yeah.
catastrophizing or avoiding.
I know it. Oh my gosh. I'm a big
Yeah,
journaler, so I can go
I
back and
love
look at some of the journal entries that I put
that.
or in it. And some of them were just very simple about I feel scared, I feel angry, and I can see that. And then there were some days where I just kind of, for lack of a term, threw up in the journal and wrote everything down. But there were some days I could tell I was at my wits' end and I didn't want to write anything. And so it
Mm,
was just words.
mm,
So
totally.
yeah, it's just that piece.
I
Well,
think you
yeah.
are a warrior, Kathy. Like
Oh,
you are.
thank you.
I think there are people. There's so many people I've connected to, and especially in my filmmaking, because we're
Yeah.
all like connected in this way. And
Yeah.
I am so honored to meet you, and
Oh.
I love meeting people who I think are big-hearted warrior people. And we often get there the really hard way,
Yes.
but
But I'll tell you
makes
something, a secret about me. I am not very good at nursing. And I know that I'm not supposed to be so negative about that. But I mean, I pass out if my dog gets a shot in the vet. So my husband, he had his knee surgery and I had to change a drain tube and I was like gagging. So I can do all of the administrative stuff and the helping stuff, but when it comes to doing any type of, you know, blood pathogens or nursing, you might as well forget it. Kathy's not
Yeah. Oh
engaged.
my gosh. That's the thing about caregiving is you don't get to choose like
Oh,
which activities you actually do.
yes.
You just go
Yes.
do that. You're like,
It's
"What,
kind of like
me?"
parenting too. Parenting too,
Yes.
your child wakes up in the middle of the night
Yes.
and they throw up in their bed. He's like, you have to
Yeah.
figure it out and do
Uh, so
it.
ridiculous. Like I know it's like I always think about that with being a mom. I'm like, we have to do all these categories whether we feel good at them or not. And that's the same thing with caregiving. It's like I'm good at that stuff.
I know it.
Oh
Thank
my
goodness my
gosh.
sister was a CNA or certified nursing assistant, so she could help me
That's
do some of
amazing.
those things because yeah, and so we tag teamed a little bit, especially in the last few months of my both of my parents' life. It's like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness. But
That's such a
well,
gift.
I can't wait. I'll put the website out there for the Wake Up Maggie movie so
Thank you.
people can go ahead and start looking at it. I know that you're taking donations and trying to fund this and self-fund
Mm.
it so people can go ahead and look at that as an option if they have the financial capability to do that. And I think, don't you have a Instagram page with
Yeah.
Wake Up Maggie so we can kind of follow the progress? I
Yes.
can't
Yes.
wait. So we'll
Yes.
we'll go ahead and
Yes.
keep following you and seeing how this movie's going to go and where it's going to evolve because I think like you had said it's going to touch so many caregivers out there.
I know it will. I know it will. And I think that's the beauty of making art that really matters to you is like, I think if one person's life is better for this work I'm doing, then it's such a huge reward.
Oh my gosh, what a perfect way to end the
Just
podcast episode, too. I think that's just great. So, I
thank you.
personally thank you from the bottom of my heart for going ahead and doing this movie because I think this is just going to create more awareness. And
Thank you.
I'm so amazed now at how caregiving has become. a platform for a lot of people. And the more we can go ahead and shout it out
Mm,
to the top of the world and
absolutely.
help each other through it, I think this is a great way. So
Yes.
I can't thank you enough. Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you,
I get to meet
Kathy.
a superstar actress, director, filmmaker. Woohoo.
You're so cute. I think you're a superstar, honestly.
I'm sending positive vibes your way. So, oh my gosh, I'll be thinking of you early next year. So,
Thank you. Yeah, we'll take all the energy and love we can get. Yes.
well, I appreciate your time. And I'm just going to hit the stop the record button here once.